Deeming his deck Mardu Blue. You know, it really is kind of this hybrid here between Jeskai, Esper. You see Adrian, little homage here, starting out with a Patrick Sullivan token on the battlefield.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Adrian.
So we're going to be underway. Adrian will be going first here as the players start out.
Mardu Blue, Jeskai Black, whatever you want to call it. 4-color soup. A lot of card advantage. Cheap threats that you have to kill and that are very powerful to get back with Ojutai's command. Mixture, removal spells, some discard, some counters.
Yeah, Painful Truth's kind of the glue that's holding this one together alongside Jace.
The metagame has been moving to a place where Painful Truth has gone from a couple copies in the sideboard to a couple copies in the main deck. 4 in the main is a lot. But assuming that Adrian is able to avoid the Atarka Red matchup, it should serve him very well over the course of this weekend. And I like making gutsy metagame calls in tournaments like this. The top end is so heavy. It's 10 grand plus a spot in the Players' Championship. You're really looking to spike top 8 performances and then some. And if you can say, all right, well, I'm not going to be a Atarka Red, but I'm going to have a huge edge against everything else, that kind of strategy is more likely to result in top 8s and wins than trying to play something in the middle.
Adrian with some interesting mana on the first turns, disguising his deck a little. He has Smoldering Marsh and Mountain, so just red and black in play. Meanwhile, on Jarvis' side, his first play is going to be a Jace on turn 2, though Adrian at the ready with Fiery Impulse. And now we'll see the rest of the colors. Prairie Stream was Adrian's third land, so between his 2 battle lands, he has all 4 colors covered. Pressure will be on Jarvis to get his first play.
Both these players with signature career-defining performances inside of the last year. Jarvis Yu with a win at Legacy Grand Prix in Seattle recently. Adrian Sullivan with his first Pro Tour top 8. Top 4 finish, I believe.
For Jarvis, it'll be a Nantuko Husk. Now having all his colors of mana, has basic Forest, basic Plains, and a blue-black dual land. Adrian at the ready with another removal spell, though. It is a copy of Roast. So 2 removal spells in the yard for Adrian, 2 creatures in the yard for Jarvis. Nothing on the board. And Jarvis, a 4th land and a pass. That, on Adrian's side, that's got to feel like there's a collected company coming.
Most likely. And Adrian just doesn't have a lot of interaction for this game 1. So it wouldn't surprise me now with the shields down for Jarvis taking an opportunity here and try to resolve his collected company. Didn't cast it on his own turn, shows us some respect there. Adrian had blue mana available, so you don't know about Dispel or Negate, but now with Adrian tapping the Prairie Stream, good opportunity for Jarvis to land it.
Yeah, it looks like he's going to do that with a Painful Truths on the stack. So both players taking their turn 4 to really get some card advantage, reload for the later turns. And we'll see what Collected Company can find here. Some options for Jarvis. We have Elvish Visionary, Zulaport Cutthroat. Looks like he does have options. He's going to go for Sidisi's Faithful and Elvish Visionary. That's a bold claim here on card advantage. So he'll draw off Elvish Visionary. The Sidisi's Faithful will exploit itself, and he will bounce Elvish Visionary. And that's, you know, no pressure on the board. He just cares about cards in hand and cards in graveyard.
And if Adrian's going to kind of hang back here and just draw cards and kill stuff, I think Jarvis's game plan for the matchup here is just trade, draw some cards, trade, draw some cards, fill up the graveyard, and then bury you or possibly even kill you with a rally.
Yeah, it's a really interesting line here. You know, I would have expected on first glance, Zulaport Cutthroat is one of the cards that really matters in this matchup, but, you know, Jarvis signaling that cards matter more than anything else.
Well, he's going to be not be able to tax Sullivan's life total for quite a while here. On top of that, he's playing in a matchup where Sullivan has access to Ojutai's command, Soulfire Grandmaster, so Sullivan could be gaining large chunks of life along a protracted game. With all that said, it makes a lot of sense for Jarvis to care more about card advantage and raw resources in the graveyard rather than trying to get Adrian for a point or 2 along the way.
Oh, well, Jarvis goes back to his turn. He will recast the Elvish Visionary, and it'll be joined by a copy of Catacomb Sifter. So 3 creatures on Jarvis's side now. Has 4 powers. We will go back to Adrian Sullivan. That'll be the first creature on his side, a copy of Jace Vryn's Prodigy. Did have to tap himself out of blue mana, it appears, to make that play. Remember, Adrian drew 3 last turn off Painful Truths. We'll see if he does have the land, however.
And the bigger concern for me in Sullivan's spot, land or no, and it appears he's missing his land drop, his deck is just not well suited to play this sort of game one, even if he's drawing a lot of cards. He's only got 1 Dispel and 1 Ugin really to shut the door on use combo. And that's just not a lot even if you're drawing a bunch of cards.
Yeah, so Adrian used the rest of his turn there. He delved his graveyard away to cast a Tasigur. You mentioned the Dispel and Ugin, the Ugin in Adrian's hand. However, if he's not hitting his land drops on the way up, it's going to be hard for him to get to that one in time.
Yeah, I mean, we're minimum 4 turns away and probably more than that.
Both players with nearly full grips.
And get used to that watching Standard this weekend if you haven't watched a lot of the format. There are just a lot of ancestral recalls floating around in this format.
Yeah, you know, that really is it. We looked at these Rally decks and the Mardu decks. Both players casting spells each turn, but each spell either cantrips or redraws. We'll see Jarvis continues to add to the board. Another copy of Elvish Visionary. Did get a peek at his hand here. Does have a copy of Rally the Ancestors in waiting. So if he can load the graveyard up enough, he can set up one of the combo kills that we expect out of the deck.
And he's got Nantuko Husk already in the graveyard, which is the key engine piece once you're starting to do that sort of thing.
So after the Elvish Visionary, it'll be a face-down creature for Jarvis.
Game 1, that's very likely to be Grim Horror Specs.
And we see he left up a blue-black duel as well. It unmorphs for single black. You're right, that is the only morph out of the main deck. Actually, for Jarvis, it's the only morph in the 75.
Interesting. You sometimes see Den Protector in these slots. It looks like Jarvis has cut those for Elvish Visionaries.
Grim Harspec's one of the linchpins here, I guess, of yet another source of card advantage that we've been talking about.
And I can get behind Elvish Visionary in this deck. My biggest criticism of 4-color Rally is sometimes the first 2 turns of the game, it just doesn't do anything. I'm not comfortable playing decks like that, given the speed of the format at times. So Elvish Visionary is just something to do with your mana early on in the game.
Now for Adrian, he loots away a second copy of Tasigur. That does find him his land, as we'll see a Soulfire Grandmaster for him, followed up by a Roast targeting Grim Haruspex. Great sequencing here by Adrian. Grim Haruspex does not draw off its own death, it's just other creatures. And the Roast, thanks to Soulfire Grandmaster, will put Adrian back up to 21.
And that sort of turn that you saw from Sullivan is why you didn't value the Zulaport Cutthroat earlier on in that collected company. Just very likely over the course of this game, Sullivan gains life and in big chunks too. Ojutai's Command can be worth 4. Soulfire Grandmaster plus Roast can be worth 5. So best to just worry about card advantage and leave the life total for somewhere else down the line.
All right, well, now that Haruspex is off the table, Tasigur can safely swing in. Jarvis will still take the block. Elvish Visionary jumps in front. You see him get the Scry trigger off Catacomb Sifter, and he will leave on top. So we'll see what that card was. It looks like it was a copy of Zulaport Cutthroat.
And that's as you right now is approaching the combo, a copy of the Cutthroat's very valuable because he has Nantuko Husk, he has a Horus Specs. All the engine pieces are here.
Yeah, and I mean, this is playing out in the way that I always like to see Rally decks play out, where you feel like they're just chump blocking their way to rally the Ancestors.
Mm-hmm. And that's the position this deck takes a lot in the mid-range matchups, which is the issue here with Sullivan's build for this particular matchup game 1. You can draw all the cards that you want, but if you are not locking them out of the game or coming packed with a bunch of counter spells to keep them off Rally, what they do with Rally eventually dwarfs any incremental advantages you've accrued up until that point.
Right, an extra card off, you know, Tasigur activations, for example. They just feel like they don't matter.
They do not matter. You need to find cards that matter. Now, the other side of this is Adrian is definitely improving his matchup against most mid-range strategies by just having access to a lot of card advantage, because that's often what these matchups are about game 1. Removal, card advantage, and good threats. But that's one of the merits of playing Rally in this format is a lot of people's tools just don't line up with what you're up to.
Just 2 cards remain in Jarvis's hand. Believe it is a land and a Rally the Ancestors. Rather 3. On Adrian's side, we do see that copy of Ugin still waiting. Looks like he has solved his land problems, thanks to cards like Jace. So here's land 6. You mentioned it. He doesn't have any acceleration. He just has to slowly work his way up toward Ugin. And game 1, you mentioned there's a main deck Dispel, but outside of that, how many ways does Adrian have, if any, to interact with this rally in Jarvis' hand?
It's just Dispel. And the one copy of Ugin can qualify as interaction because when you minus Ugin, everything in question gets exiled. But that does not necessarily stop Rally from killing him in response or from generating so much card advantage that you can untap and kill him.
Right, so with Soulfire Grandmaster, is it possible for Adrian to life gain himself out of range of this rally?
It's part of the plan. I mean, if Sullivan can get to Ugin and not die from a rally, his position becomes commanding. And Soulfire Grandmaster buys him some time to get there.
So 6th land from Sullivan, and he will just pass.
The other thing here is if Sullivan happens to find the Dispel paired with Soulfire Grandmaster.
Right, he can. One Dispel is enough.
Yeah, it's that setup is very tough for you to break through, especially if that buys Sullivan enough time to get to 9 mana and play Ugin with Dispel backup, and then it's very hard for you to work his way out of that.
What might be a concerning draw here, we see Jarvis on his turn pick up another copy of Zulaport Cutthroat, and Adrian will have none of that. Here's Ojutai's command to counter. 1 is something he could maybe life gain away from. Once there's 2 in play, then all bets are off.
Well, this might be a spot here for you to let it rip. If he gets his rally to resolve here, he gets back Husk, Horror Specs, and another Zulaport Cutthroat. So that's a lot of life gain, a lot of cards, a lot of damage.
Mm-hmm. And we're gonna go. It's go time. And Adrian knew it as well. If you look back to his Ojutai's command, he chose to gain 4 as opposed to drawing the card as the second mode.
Yeah, and I think Sullivan is just doing what he can to weather the storm and hopefully allow Ugin to resolve, to clear him out of the game.
All right, so rally resolves. We look at the creatures in play. He got back a second Cutthroat, a Elvish Visionary, a Sidisi's Faithful, a Nantuko Husk, a copy of Jace, and a copy of Grim Haruspex. So the first thing he did was draw a card off of the Elvish Visionary, and now we get to the point where he's counting. Remember, he does have two Zulaport Cutthroats and a Nantuko Husk in play. And it looks like the Elvish Visionary was sacrificed to the Exploit on Sidisi's Faithful to bounce Soulfire Grandmaster. So Adrian drops to 22. Remember, these creatures do not have haste. And Jarvis counting over, seeing if he does have lethal. Appears he has 9 creatures on the board. And we will start. Sidisi's Faithful sacrificed to Nantuko Husk. Remembering, all these will draw cards off of Grim Haruspex.
And this is the issue. Even if Sullivan doesn't die, Jarvis may draw so many cards that finishing the game next turn won't be hard. Because remember, you can sack everything through the Nantuko Husk. That evades the Rally trigger on his upkeep because everything will just be back in the graveyard. And if you was able to find another copy of Rally,
we just do it again.
Yeah, just go and do it again. And if Sullivan gets through the first one here, I'd be shocked if he got through the second one.
Yeah, and you saw there Jarvis scrying before the draw. That's thanks to the Catacomb Sifter. Picked up another copy of Elvish Visionary. And yeah, that's really the nice part about this deck. Rally is not just a combo finisher. It can also be played as this value spell, which is what I feel like what we're seeing Jarvis do right now.
The old builds last year with Bogus' Marauder, those were combo decks.
Those killed you.
And sometimes Rally Ancestors is good enough to kill someone. And like I said, I think if another one shows up here for Jarvis, that's going to kill Adrian pretty easily. But you can just play a value game. You do not have to combo out to win with this deck.
Looks like Jarvis will pass the turn, so Adrian's going to go ahead and loot the Jace. And yeah, Jarvis's creatures don't exile until the beginning of his next upkeep, so he actually can leave them all here as blockers.
What's also nice about that is I believe you can put the trigger on the stack for Rally, loot with Jace.
Oh, wow, and then he flips it.
Becomes a Planeswalker, sacrifices everything else, and then he has flashback for the Rally.
So because the Jace changes from a creature into a Planeswalker, does that mean then the Jace Planeswalker will not get exiled, correct?
That is my understanding.
All right, so see what Adrian can do here. He's going to recast that Soulfire Grandmaster that was bounced, play a second one. And now with 2 of them in play, he'll go ahead and give that roast flashback. It's tricky. We'll see what he goes at. May or may not get life gain because of an Nantuko Husk.
Yeah.
And it looks like he's going to go for the Nantuko Husk. So force some action on Jarvis's side. And we will go for some triggers, some extra cards from Jarvis. Has to make all those plays now, because once the Nantuko Husk is gone, he will lose his ability to sacrifice creatures. So first sacrifice will happen. It's Elvish Visionary. Jarvis gains 1, gains 2, Adrian loses 2, Jarvis scries 1, then draws. It's not a bad conversion there.
And he can just keep doing that.
Actually, if it just sacrifices 2 creatures, the Husk will be out of range of Roast. He can just let Roast resolve.
I don't see a huge incentive for you to allow that to happen if the plan is just to rally again next turn.
More sacrifices on the way. This one is going to be the Scion token from Catacomb Sifter. You see him reloading his hand. He picked up an Nantuko Husk. Looks like an Evolving Wilds. Hasn't found that second rally just yet. Scries to the bottom. Remember, he doesn't get to draw off that one because Grim Horror specs only says non-token creatures. But the roast resolves. Adrian's up to 21. Nantuko Husk stays alive with 5 damage on it. And now we go back to Jarvis' upkeep. So here's where the rally trigger is going to be on the stack. If Jarvis doesn't sacrifice his creatures, he will lose those 3 you see on the bottom of the screen.
Now, the rally does exile, so the initial rally is still not available there. But Jarvis is looking at so many cards at this stage, very likely that he just finds another copy.
You're right. So you saw, as you said, with this rally trigger on the stack, upkeep, he looted and flipped the Jace. And now he's going to sacrifice the rest of the creatures. So here's Zulaport Cutthroat getting sacrificed. 2 more life, 1 more scry, 1 card draw. And he hasn't found another rally just yet. So if he doesn't find one here, then this may be okay for Adrian, right?
I mean, life goes on. The problem is that Sullivan's pretty far away from being able to kill Jarvis, and again, Jarvis looks at so many cards in this process. It's very hard to keep him off of rally in the long term.
Yeah, and you see Jarvis digging very hard for rally. Actually sacrificed the Nantuko Husk there, which means Grim Haruspex is exiled to the rally trigger. And finally, we get to Jarvis's draw steps. So looking at things he's picked up are multiple lands, Elvish Visionary, Nantuko Husk, Collected Company. And he'll start with a Collected Company. Adrian's tapped out, or tapped down to 1. And what's he looking for off this? He's found a rally in here, but he obviously can't take that.
I think probably just trying to find more information, maybe a Husk to keep the leftover creatures in the graveyard.
Sure. He finds a Sidisi's Faithful and another copy of Jace. He'll exploit away the Jace to bounce Tasigur. Scries to the bottom. And it's going to be another Collected Company. He did have to bottom 1 of his copies of Rally the Ancestors. This Collected Company finds 2 Jaces, or, well, we'll see actually which Planeswalker they are. He does also play Liliana, so it looks like he has 1 of each. So 2 more Walkers. And Jace will plus, targeting a Soulfire Grandmaster. He'll play an Evolving Wilds and actually attack at Adrian's Jace. This is interesting because of that first Jace plus. This is going to be a chump block.
Yep. Or a double block that ends up flipping Liliana, which I'm sure you is totally happy with and that Sullivan can't allow to have happen.
So 1 Soulfire Grandmaster jumps in front of the Catacomb Sifter. We go back to Adrian. Going to plus the Jace and swing at Jarvis. Well, Still, Sidisi's Faithful will jump in front of that. Adrian gets to gain 2 life. And here is Ugin. We knew it was coming. Jarvis with no sack outlet. This is actually going to work.
Yes, this is a now. Yu's graveyard is still pretty stocked, and you get to keep the Catacomb Sifter. So this
Because
is not,
it's colorless.
right. So not the end of the world, but this was the play that Adrian was trying to build towards the whole time.
Yeah, you mentioned Ugin is one of the few interactive cards Adrian has game 1. He has survived to get it on the board, survived through a Rally of the Ancestors, and what seemed like Jarvis drawing his entire deck.
Well, now the problem is, from Sullivan's side, you see he's down to 2 cards in hand. Yu is gassed back up. He's going to be able to pressure this Ugin with the Catacomb Sifter that's in play.
Yeah, we've talked about how much card advantage is in Adrian's list, and it's no joke, but it doesn't keep pace with things like Rally of the Ancestors. The Sifter will go to work on Ugin. It was at 4, now down to 2. See on Jarvis' side, it's going to continue with another main phase Collected Company. Looks like this one's going to find... He has a Nantuko Husk and a Catacomb Sifter. So 3 more creatures into play. Yeah, there seems to be an unending supply of creatures. Maybe no combo kill for Jarvis, but he may be able to win this one fairly.
Yeah, and that's what's really impressive about this deck. Because there's no source of haste, it's very rare for this deck to purely combo out, like we saw last year with Mogus' Marauders, but you can just keep gassing back up.
Yeah. The plays for Jarvis played Elvish Visionary and Grim Haruspex, using up all his mana, but once again, 6 creatures on the board for Jarvis, was able to reload after an Ugin minus with relative ease.
And Sullivan here cast a Painful Truth this game, has had some other forms of card advantage, got an Ugin to wipe the board, and he feels like the one that is way down on resources currently.
3 cards remaining. Can he keep pace? Ugin will plus to try to hit the Grim Haruspex. Jarvis is going to go drawing some cards first. He'll sacrifice the Elvish Visionary. He gets 2 scries and then a draw. With that kind of selection, you would not be surprised if he's able to find one of those rallies.
Jarvis has got 4 or 5 spells in his hand. I mean, he is still totally stocked to play a long game, even if he doesn't find Rally of the Ancestors. And that seems unlikely because Jarvis is drawing a million cards and scrying a million times, and it's only a matter of time.
Haruspex dies there to Ugin. Don't believe he scryed after that one, but found a replacement Haruspex already. You see Jarvis's graveyard just loaded right now. 1 Reality of the Ancestors, if were to resolve, would certainly be lethal.
Yep. And that's the enviable position for Jarvis to be in. If he finds the rally, that makes it easy. If he fails to do so, that's not the end of the world.
Yeah.
Jarvis can still just play a regular game of Magic here.
Well, Adrian will try to restock with card advantage. Looks like he has another copy of Tasigur. Selectively choosing what to delve away and what to keep. He has left just Soulfire Grandmaster and Ojutai's Command in the graveyard. Both those cards, as he starts getting up to lots of mana, you know, they can loop in the late game. I mean, and maybe Adrian will need to do something like that to keep pace with Jarvis.
Possibly, yes.
And it's Sidisi's Faithful from Jarvis. It'll sacrifice itself. And once again, with the Haruspex in play, it's going to be scry, draw. And the draw was what he was finally looking for here. It was the Rally of the Ancestors. He will cast it for 4. Or for 3, rather. That should be everything in the graveyard. And here we go. Whole slew of creatures, both Planeswalkers, Nantuko Husk, another Haruspex, multiple Cutthroats, triple Elvish Visionary, some Sidisi's Faithfuls, just about everything jumping out.
I mean, Ugin did what it could.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of things exiled.
Yep. Can't be mad with Ugin's contribution to this game, but without a way to shut the door on the instance, it felt like it was only a matter of time for the game to get to this spot unless Adrian was fortunate enough to find the Dispel.
Yeah, and I mean, that's exactly it. With this, the number of scries and draws that Jarvis had, you knew he was going to find a rally. Adrian's going to have him walk through it. So we'll do that with you. We have 3 draws off Elvish Visionaries and 2 exploits off Sidisi's Faithful. Those immediately go onto the stack. So the exploits will bounce Adrian's creatures. Tasigur back in his hand. Has drawn another copy of Rally. Adrian at 18, there appears to be 1 Zulaport Cutthroat in play. The other one was exiled off the Ugin. But that Nantuko Husk on Jarvis' side is not, it was already in play before the rally.
Yes. So lethal attacker, hypothetically, Adrian could have a card like Crackling Doom to answer it, so it's not, you know, he should definitely make Jarvis play this out.
Looks like the Sifters will go at Ugin, and the Husk will go at Adrian. So even if the Husk dies, Jarvis has a pretty good backup plan that he'll get Adrian's Planeswalker.
Yep. And still be left with a lot of things in play to sacrifice, more cards to be drawn, cutthroat triggers.
He's got everything.
I like you playing it safe here. I mean, he could have just tried to sacrifice everything right now and so forth, but he has respect enough for what Sullivan could have here, specifically Crackling Doom, that just push on him this turn, make Sullivan respond.
3 creatures sacrificed means Nantuko Husk is an 8/8 right now, so 4 more sacrifices will make it lethal, and Jarvis is going to go for that. Here's 1, 2 off an Elvish Visionary. You see him also doing light points of damage with Zulaport Cutthroat, so 3 now means the Husk is at 14. Those 3 drains put Adrian at 13, so now it's lethal. And the check is, does Adrian have maybe a Valorous Stance, a Crackling Doom? And he will Murderous Cut at the Nantuko Husk. That'll work. Another drain, though. Adrian down to 12.
Again, we're just playing on, though. This is not any real forward progress here for Sullivan.
Well, yeah, Jarvis has picked up another copy of Rally in his hand, so as soon as next turn, we're just gonna go again. And now Adrian has lost his Ugin. Still has that copy of Tasigur from last turn. He'll delve away the entire graveyard for it. Play a land and pass. And for Jarvis. He's got Adrian to 11 off Cutthroat triggers. Upkeep, he's going to go back to sacrificing. There's no Haruspecs, so these are just drains. Jace will loot and flip. You see Jarvis having really picked up the pace here. I think he knows this game is his and just wants to make sure that the clock is at a spot that's comfortable for him.
Well, it's going to be a challenge regardless if Adrian should win game number 2. Adrian made the decision here, even though things were looking bad, make you go through the process. Maybe he messes up. The consequence of that is there's not a whole lot of time left on the clock.
The interesting one in Jarvis's hand, he actually has a 1 of Bring to Light in his list that he's drawn here, and that's something we haven't seen too much in 4-Color Rally.
Matthew Tickle and Eric Hawkins were playing a little bit with that last week. I think the 1 copy was in both of their lists, but it's just another way to get Collected Company or so your last linchpin creature as appropriate.
All right, well, game 1 does go to Jarvis. Showing another rally is enough to get the scoop here from Adrian. Should be able to finish him off Zulaport Cutthroat triggers. So he is up 1-0. You mentioned how game 1, Adrian has little interaction. I imagine that's going to change as he looks toward his sideboard.
He's got 2 copies of Surge of Righteousness, 2 copies of Negate, a Dispel, an Exert Influence, a Transgress the Mind, 2 copies of Infinite Obliteration, a Murderous Cut, 3 Radiant Flames, an Utter End, and a Crackling Doom. Negate and Dispel definitely come in here. Helps Adrian actually answer the card that he can't really stop in game 1, which is Rally. I've heard mixed reviews on both Infinite Obliteration and Radiant Flames in this kind of matchup.
Right.
Infinite Obliteration can usually get Nantuko Husk out of the deck, and then a lot of the lines are cut off. But as we saw, you won that game a lot had to do with just valuing Sullivan out. And Nantuko Husk wasn't necessarily the biggest player.
So if Nantuko Husk is completely exiled, if it's infinitely obliterated, can Jarvis still make those value plays? Because then suddenly with Rally the Ancestors, he has no way to sacrifice these creatures that come back. He can't draw off Grim Horror Specs as easily.
It becomes harder, but Sullivan still can get buried just by, Grim Horror Specs and creatures and collected companies. I've seen it before. So yes, Infinite Obliteration locks out some lines, but it is double black, not the easiest card to cast, and is not a guarantee to be productive in every single game. Same is true of Radiant Flames.
That much makes sense. On Jarvis' side, his sideboard is 2 Fleshbag Marauders, 2 Arishan Clerics, a full playset of Murderous Cuts, 3 Duresses, a Dispel, an Anna Svenza the Foremost, and then this one that we see crop up from time to time, a copy of Abzan Ascendancy.
So I can definitely get behind the 3 copies of Duress and Dispel, helpful for you, punching through his combo, and in a matchup where your opponent's playing with non-token threats, creatures that represent significant investment, 2 copies of Fleshbag Marauder will be very good.
So if you haven't seen it yet, at StarCityGames.com, we still have our Fall Creature Collection on sale now. We're reaching the end of fall, so if you haven't gotten them, you're going to want to get them soon. This is the Fall 2015 collection of all the arts you've seen on our SCG Game Night tokens and pins and playmats as well. You can get them in sleeves. We have penguins, we have the hippo, we have the otter, and we have the December one, which is the caribou. So you can get them on any of these. Find out more at StarCityGames.com/creature collection. And players are going to speed it up here, you see, toward game 2. I think both are aware there's only 18 or so minutes left in the round. They're going to have to work at a clip if they want to get a potential third game in.
And with right now the metagame being a lot of 4-color, long games, soupy decks, and the complexity and time involved with the fetch land, battle land, mana bases, rounds going to time, pretty common.
For Adrian, it's going to be a keep and Jarvis on a mulligan here. And so what I would look for out of a deck like Adrian Sullivan's is any way he has to speed up his win condition. Sometimes you see maybe a different game plan he can go to or something of that sort.
Well, his sideboard is all discard and removal and counter spells. So
nothing
gonna go with no.
Yeah. It's so even when he wins convincingly, it still takes a while?
Yes.
Oh, we'll see both players going to try to speed up through that. Jarvis ended up keeping on 5 cards. So we'll see if he can make a game of it. On Adrian's side, it is a chance to capitalize and get a quick second game. But other than turn 2 Jace, he does not have a lot of early pressure.
No.
See here, Adrian sitting back on copies of cards like Roast, Painful Truths, more lands.
And the card drawing and removal game can be good for Sullivan in this matchup if he can stop the big spells. If you can cut off Rally, you cut off Collecting Company. It's the recipe we saw Kibler do in round number 1, which unfortunately you didn't get an opportunity to watch. But with a couple of dispels and negates, pressure and removal was a winning game plan against this deck.
All right, so it's going to be a Transgress the Mind from Adrian Sullivan. This is turn 3. We'll see what Jarvis is sitting on is 2 copies of Zulaport Cutthroat. He has a Sidisi's Faithful, a 3rd land, and then he has a Jace Vryn's Prodigy in his hand.
So that is a miss.
Yeah, no legal targets. Looking for cards like Collected Company and Nantuko Husk when he casts that.
Grim Horror Specs also one of the best ways for Jarvis to pull out of a mulligan to 5.
And we see from Jarvis' side, he has a Jace on the following turn here. You see, and just that value play again. It was Sidisi's Faithful sacrificing itself to bounce Elvish Visionary. Adrian at the ready to roast away the Jace for Jarvis. He now resupplies with a Catacomb Sifter. On Adrian's side, missed a land drop here. Looks like a second one missed as well. He now has his own Jace. Multiple copies of Painful Truths, but it seems like Adrian doesn't want to take a turn off of playing things to the board.
Yeah, I think he's got enough interaction with Radiant Flames and Jace that he wants to wait until he runs out of things to do, or he can Painful Truths and follow up with something in the same turn.
All right, so back over to Jarvis Yu. His first play is an Elvish Visionaries. That's his 3rd creature onto the board. Once again, doing a great job here of playing cards, but not really ever investing cards to do it.
Yep, and very important to be doing this post-board when you could very easily be playing against a sweeper.
Fetches for another Sunken Hollow. And this is actually interesting that fetch there for Jarvis. He did not get white mana. You see him go for Zulaport Cutthroat. Though he does have a copy of Rally the Ancestors in his hand. 4 lands, but no white yet.
Any needs for double black?
He does play Liliana in his deck, so that could be, if it's in his hand, that would be a reason to do it.
Yep.
Adrian side, see him fetching up that red source. And this could be a great turn. If he flips Jace, that Radiant Flames will be completely one-sided. And it looks like that's where he'll go. A loot off Jace, the draw was Dispel. You mentioned how important that card can be.
Yeah, wipe the board, leave up Dispel, answer Nantuko Husk as it shows up, and Sullivan will probably be in a very commanding position this game.
Ojutai's command was the discard, so Jace flips into a Planeswalker. Then the follow-up is Radiant Flames. That's going to sweep the entire board. And how nice for Adrian to know, because there's no white mana on Jarvis' side, that he has a turn to wait on Dispel.
Yeah, that's a big deal here.
Right, the worry would be that Jarvis simply untaps, rallies for 3, and just puts everything back, undoes all the work.
Well, a rally for 3 wouldn't be all that bad for Sullivan right now. You would draw a couple cards, but it wouldn't be the end of the world. But yes, having insurance against that, pretty important.
You see, so Jarvis drawing in a Plains for the turn. Because of the fetch, though, he's not going to be able to cast Rally. He will cast a Liliana. That's why he got the second black last turn. So Liliana versus a Jace. See 2 cards in Jarvis's hand, 6 in Sullivan's. And it will be Painful Truths. Adrian taking 3, drawing 3. Jace goes up to 7 to target Liliana, and it's another Mystic Monastery for Sullivan. He passes once again without Dispel mana up.
Yeah, this is, I think, Jarvis's last window to do something very powerful.
And he drew the second white, but it was Evolving Wild, so he won't be able to do it this turn. You see a little wipe of the brow for Adrian, as he knows that blue mana is not getting tapped again.
And now, with Sullivan's board, used board rather being fairly anemic, down to 1 card in hand, Sullivan totally loaded up with Dispel at the ready. The issue is just going to be time. You know, can Sullivan get this game done fast enough where he's got a realistic shot in the 3rd game?
Yeah, I mean, this game feels like it's his, right? He's down to 8 life points. Does he have to worry about getting burned out, so to speak, from something like Zulaport Cutthroat?
Well, there's one in the graveyard right now, and there's another one in play. So, yes, I would say so.
So, yeah, if a rally resolves, it might just be lethal on the spot.
Yeah, without being paired with a Husk, it's not a huge deal.
Yeah, one Sidisi's Faithful, I believe, and 1 Catacomb Sifter in the yard for Jarvis. So that's 4 right now.
Mm-hmm.
It's close, but not all of it. From Adrian, it's a conservative play. Roast will take care of Catacomb Sifter. Rather, will take care of Liliana. Drain of 1. See another Mystic Monastery play for Adrian, so great mana at this point. He has left up that blue for Dispel. Jarvis will continue going to work. It is a copy of Elvish Visionary. And you do feel a little bit like perhaps Jarvis could chip shot his way into this.
Going to be really hard, because the problem that I see here is that Sullivan has another copy of Radiant Flames in hand with that Dispel. Anytime the board gets built up, Adrian can clear out all of it, use down to very little in the way of total resources, and Sullivan has an answer to Rally or Collect a Company, which are the 2 best paths for you to follow this up and try to burn out.
Well, there's that Radiant Flames we were talking about. It deals 3, sweeps the board again. It is 3 death triggers for Jarvis, though, off that Zulaport Cutthroat, so Adrian Sullivan down to 5. But for Jarvis, it seems like he may be out of gas. Just makes land drops. He has 1 card in hand. It's Rally the Ancestors. And unless Adrian, at some point, takes down that blue mana, which I really can't see him doing, this rally is not going to work.
No, Sullivan knows what he's been trying to set up this whole time. He's gotten to this position. That blue mana is never getting tapped.
All right, so the Soulfire's in play. And once he untaps with 5 mana, then it's even worse, right? Because now Soulfire can buy back Dispel.
Yeah.
Land, and the difficulty will be, can Adrian win in time? So Soulfire Grandmaster is going to go to work. 2 damage at a time. It has Jarvis to 21, Adrian to 7. Starts ticking up Jace. Maybe if he can ultimate a Jace, that's a way to speed up the clock. It's he's got the game, but the question is how long it'll take for him to win it.
Yeah, and you here, I think he's sitting on a rally. I think he suspects it won't resolve if he goes for it right now, and is trying to find one of his sideboarded duresses or dispels to try to punch it through in one turn.
Okay.
Issue here, of course, Adrian getting life along the way as he's going about his business, so pulling himself further and further out of burn range.
Right, every hit of Soulfire Grandmaster is gaining him 2. And Jarvis continuing to draw and pass. Adrian, you saw there, what he did is he was trying to get a concession. He said, hey, I have this Utter End and this Dispel with Soulfire. Do you want to keep playing this? I know we're low on time. Jarvis, at the moment here, decides, yes, I do want to keep playing it. So Jarvis goes for a rally. Adrian will Dispel, but first will use Soulfire Grandmaster's ability so that the Dispel goes back to his hand.
Well, now Jarvis might be drawing live to a discard spell to punch through.
Yeah, he has a second rally. So here's his shot. If he can get a Duress, he can Duress, rally, and win. However, if he doesn't hit the Duress this turn, then this doesn't work. He's going to rally again. So he got the Dispel out of Adrian's hand is the good news.
Yep.
It only took 2 Rally the Ancestors to do that. And now Infinite Obliteration with buyback, so to speak, is cast on Jarvis. So it looks like when we were talking about those cyber cards, you weren't sure of that Adrian has brought in all of them.
Yeah. And he's got so much in the way of low impact removal spells like Crackling Doom and Murderous Cut that it's not that hard for him to find the room.
If you look at Jarvis' side, he does have a 3rd copy of Rally of the Ancestors here. So if Adrian's left without a counterspell, he'll get to resolve one. Now, to Adrian's credit, he has removed all the Nantuko Husks from Jarvis's deck.
Yeah, I think the rallies are now basically a dead end with no more copies of Nantuko Husk left in the deck.
Well, we'll see if Jarvis gets to resolve one. This is his window. Adrian has gone up to 12 off those Soulfire Grandmaster hits. So a tall order for Jarvis U. Can he pull it off? He's going to start with Collected Company. That's going to resolve 2 Duresses, 2 lands, and the last 2 cards are creatures, so he will hit. It looks like it's a Grim Haruspex, and then one of his Planeswalkers, it's a Jace. And he'll pass. So the calculation then is that Jarvis did not feel like he had enough in his graveyard to win yet, so he has to keep building it.
Yeah. It's going to be very hard now without Nantuko Husks, though.
Yeah, and Adrian's life total going even higher. There was a Fiery Impulse on end step that took care of the Grim Haruspex. Remember, that one has lifelink and deals 3. So a lightning helix, if you will. And Adrian going for another counterspell. He casts Painful Truths.
I think Adrian may have picked up another copy of Infinite Obliteration. And I'm not, and he can also just flash back the earlier one. I'm not sure if an Infinite Obliteration hits the copies of Zulaport Cutthroat if there's really any out that you has.
Well, he's going to cast Transgress the Mind, take care of Catacomb Sifter. And actually, he has the same Infinite Obliteration that he used earlier. He Soulfired it that turn. You're right. So if he takes care of something like Cutthroat, then do these rallies even do anything?
Not really. But I would also say that it would behoove Adrian to not worry that much about maximizing every opportunity here and just try to get the game over with as fast as possible. The clock is his biggest enemy right now.
Absolutely. You see tons of lands in play, Infinite Obliteration, another Fiery Impulse, a Jace Planeswalker, a Jace O2, Soulfire with mana. Everything is going his way except for that ticking clock right up there between their names. If they do go to a short game 3, I guess one question is, can Jarvis even pull out a quick win?
Yeah, his deck is much more adept to do it than Adrian's. Now, Adrian provides a lot of resistance post board, a lot of counter spells, a lot of sweepers, and Infinite Obliteration, things that make it hard for Jarvis to win quickly, but I think that his deck is definitely more adept at it. I mean, Adrian's had the full control of this game basically start to finish, and it's still taking quite a while for him to get the job done because he's hitting for 2 points of damage a turn with a Soulfire Grandmaster. That's his clock.
For Jarvis, his Jace, we'll say here, it looks like his Jace is a Planeswalker. He's going to try to cast Collected Company. Now Adrian has response. He's going to Utter End the Jace. That will work. Jace exiled. Here's Collected Company. 2 more Duresses, 2 lands, Haruspex, and a 3rd Duress, so all he gets is the creature. It still feels like there's just no route to victory this game for Jarvis.
No.
Fiery Impulse take clears off the board again, but for Adrian, it's still just that Soulfire. It's 2 damage a turn. Adrian gonna flashback Painful Truths. Here's 3 more cards. And Jarvis has got to know he's dead here, but thinking that maybe this game will go to time, perhaps.
I mean, there's no reason to concede. And
Well,
if Adrian's going to go through all these motions, you might as well.
Well, wouldn't the thought be that Jarvis is eating at his own clock right now?
With under 5 to go, I would feel like if I'm in Jarvis's position, Adrian cannot win a game this fast, and I might be able to. Now, there's a tipping point. Jarvis might have felt like they just hit it right there.
Yeah.
It's also not clear the players are even totally on top of the clock. I've played tons of feature matches where things are going on for a long time. You're immersed in the game. Jarvis is sitting there for several turns trying to think of, is there any way for me to wiggle my way out of this game or to play on? I'm not necessarily asking the judge every 5 minutes what the clock looks like.
Sure. So, I mean, there's this window, right? So if there's enough time for both players to win, and then there's this window where Jarvis has enough time, but Adrian doesn't, and he wants to end the game in that window, but if he lets the clock get too low, then we start getting in a spot where neither player can win.
Correct.
You see them both very quickly sideboarding here. We'll see if we can get it. So, okay, we've seen Jarvis win a game. In game 1, he won it, but, you know, it took him 30 minutes to do so. You said he has some quick wins. What do those ones look like for him?
Just a very good, fast curve of creatures. Probably not Rally the Ancestors necessarily, but, you know, Catacomb Sifters and Zulaport Cutthroats and
just
Grim Horseback.
Beating down?
It's not an easy way to do it, but it's possible. Adrian's deck, on the other hand, barring a fast Tassiger, I don't really think has a route to a quick kill.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, Tassiger doesn't seem like it can really ever get through blockers on Jarvis's side. I mean, it can eventually, but certainly not quickly.
Well, in the post-board games, Adrian's backing up with Radiant Flames. So fast Tassiger into Radiant Flames, I think, is Adrian's realistic route to win the game inside of the allotted time. Jarvis can just play a curve of creatures, and if Sullivan stumbles, that can get the job done. And certainly some of the Collected Company, Rally the Ancestor type of lines can finish off a game pretty quickly.
Remember, Jarvis was on a mull to 5 game 2. So now we're underway game 3. Both players, you can tell, have really picked up the pace for this one.
Yep.
We'll see what they brought to the table. Looks like multiple copies of Fiery Impulse in Adrian's hand. That might make it tough for Jarvis to win.
Definitely makes trying to win with the beatdowns a lot more complicated.
Jarvis' side does have Rally, some Planeswalkers as well. Good mix of cards. Looks like he'll just go ahead and fetch for Basic Island. He'll start out on Jace, Vryn's Prodigy. Did have to really, you know, only fetch basics for that, which hurts.
Yes. For this deck especially, color mana is a concern, though typically you're not rallying until much later in the game.
Now, Roast took care of the Jace. Jarvis, no follow-up play, but does play Evolving Wilds. You see in his hand, and this is going to be a discard spell from Adrian, he has a Zulaport Cutthroat, a Nantuko Husk, Rally the Ancestors, Collected Company, and Grim Haruspex. Now, in Adrian with a big hit here, the discard spell was Infinite Obliteration, actually. So gets all the Nantuko Husks and did catch one in Jarvis's hand.
Yeah, and now winning inside of time for Jarvis gets a lot more complicated because Nantuko Husk randomly sneaking in and dealing a bunch of damage in one turn is one of the routes. And that's off the table now.
Well, the interest in saving time, Jarvis, rather than having Adrian write down the hand, I think he's going to play it face up. As we mentioned, Haruspex, Rally, Collected Company, Cutthroat. It'll be Catacomb Sifter for Jarvis. So here is a threat. Minute 20 remaining. Both players still at 19. Trying to find that edge. For Adrian, it'll be a fetch for Prairie Stream. That's going to come into play tapped thanks to the mountain and swamp he has. And you mentioned it, early Tassiger. Okay, check. He does have that.
Step 1. Now can he get to Radiant Flames?
And he'll add Soulfire Grandmaster to the mix. Now that to me says he probably doesn't have a Radiant Flames.
Seems unlikely.
Right? I mean, he could gain a lot of life.
That's a good assessment.
He's really just going for a draw. Radiant Flames here would probably put him out of reach. But yeah, can't imagine that's his line. So for Jarvis, as he does hit the 4th land, it's Collected Company. Only hits one creature off it, though. That's Elvish Visionary. And you see he's playing a mix of cards face up and face down. Adrian says he's written them down already. Doesn't need Jarvis to do that, so Jarvis picks them up and passes the turn. Collected Company was cast off that Eldrazi Scion token, so Jarvis then plays a land post-combat. It was a land he drew off Visionary. Adrian with Transgress the Mind takes Grim Haruspex, leaves Rally the Ancestors, Zulaport, Cutthroat, and then a Planeswalker in Jarvis's hand. Tasigur will swing, Jarvis will chump with Visionary. And with a lot of time, this plan of chumping his way to Rally could really work here. But if you notice up at the top, we are in extra turns.
And we are in Adrian's turn right now, which means that Jarvis will get turns 1, 3, and 5, meaning Sullivan's only got 2 attacks. So even in the optimistic scenario where both of those creatures connect twice, he's still short. He needs more help.
Does he have any burn? Or maybe he can add another creature to the board?
He's got 3 copies of Crackling Doom. My best guess is those are in his sideboard right now.
So that means, so Adrian probably unable to win from this board. We'll see if Jarvis can do it. It would take a lot. Here's turn 1. Jarvis confirming that he indeed is the first turn of extra. Rally the Ancestors, Zulaport, Cutthroat. Great pieces, but not going to help them much. He's going to go for Collected Company. This is on Adrian's turn, turn 2. On Adrian's upkeep, Jarvis goes for Collected Company. That's met with a Dispel from Sullivan. He will Fiery Impulse away the Catacomb Sifter. Swing for 6. Has Jarvis on to 13. And you mentioned it. This is close to the game plan we needed for Adrian. It feels like he may just end up 1 or perhaps 2 attacks short.
Yep.
Shambling Vent is on the board, so his next attack could be for 8. But I don't know if there's a way to make it up to 12. He only has 1 more attack going. We'll see if he can do it. Jarvis plays a copy of Zulaport Cutthroat. And add Jace to the mix. So 2 blockers, plays a land. His last card is Rally. Adrian knows about it. That fetch land is the second white that Jarvis would need to cast it.
And now I believe Adrian just trying to see if there's any way for him to get lethal across the table on his last turn. Like I said, I believe the answer is no.
Does not appear to be one. Looks like he will use that last card in his hand on end step. The Fiery Impulse will take care of Zulaport, Cutthroat. Adrian will go to 22, Jarvis to 13. And turn 4. And activate, let's see, draws Painful Truths. Tasigur, Painful Truths, and Jace were the draws. Or rather, Fiery Impulse was one of them. So that'll take care of the Jarvis's Jace. His board's empty. A swing of just Tasigur on Adrian's side. Or rather, Tasigur and redecides. It's Tasigur and Soulfire. So he's going to end with Jarvis at 7 as we go to turn 5. Jarvis will have the ability to cast Rally the Ancestors as he goes to 6. Unless Adrian has another Dispel. And it looks like he's not even going to go for the second source of white mana. He may not have it, actually. I don't... Yeah, he only has 1 Prairie Stream.
Yeah, pretty commonly the case.
So he'll cast Fleshbag Marauder. That was his draw. Soulfire will die. Fleshbag will die. And that's going to be turn 5. So that's the conclusion of the game. Neither player able to win inside turns.
Adrian just needed 1 more attack there.
Yeah, and that's going to end in a draw for both players. So 1-0-1 for Jarvis Yu and Adrian Sullivan.